He spent his last cent to see the birth. Not his last paycheck, not his last savings, his last cent. The rent was late, the lights were about to be cut off, and the only thing standing between 11th-hour desperation and complete collapse was a crumpled note in his pocket. The money he chose to spend on a one-way bus ticket to the hospital where his child was about to be born. On that crowded bus, squeezed between strangers and plastic bags, he held a tiny pair of baby socks in his hands like they were made of glass. He had bought them months before, back when overtime still existed, and the future looked a little less cruel. Every bump in the road reminded him of every sacrifice, the extra shifts, the skipped meals, the things he sold quietly so no one would notice, his tools, his old watch, even the TV. As the city lights faded and miles turned into hours, he replayed the same dream in his mind. Walking into the hospital room, seeing the baby for the first time, hearing a small cry, and finally, being called Dad with pride. He had already chosen the nickname, already imagined the first birthday, the first steps, the first time those little hands would hold his finger. But when he stepped off the bus, the cold air hit a different reality. His shoes were worn, his jacket thin, his stomach empty, but his heart was full of one thing only: the certainty that every sacrifice would valer a pena the moment he saw that baby's face. He climbed the hospital stairs with shaking legs, clutching the socks like a promise he refused to break. He didn't know yet that before he could even hold the child, one sentence would tear through everything he had built in his heart and drag his story all the way to a courtroom where DNA, not dreams, would decide what father really means. His name was Daniel Parker, but for months he had started to answer to another name in his mind: Dad. It was a strange thing, how a word he never heard growing up had become the only one he wanted to be called. Daniel was raised on the sound of slammed doors and broken promises. His own father was more rumor than memory, a shadow that appeared in stories and arguments, but never at birthdays or school plays. Maybe that was why, when Melissa told him she was pregnant, the fear hit first, and then came the promise. "I won't be like him," he had whispered into her belly one night, his rough hand resting on the small curve that kept growing. "I don't care how hard it gets, I'll be here." Hard came faster than he expected. The factory cut overtime, then cut hours, then cut people. Daniel survived the first 2 rounds, but survive didn't pay what it used to. The little apartment they rented swallowed most of his paycheck. The rest disappeared into rent, bills, and a long receipt of prenatal vitamins, doctor visits, and cheap takeout on nights when Melissa was too exhausted to cook. He started trimming pieces of his own life away, piece by piece. First went the Sunday beers with the guys after work, then the streaming subscription, then the gym membership he barely used. When that wasn't enough, he opened his closet and made harder choices. The watch his grandfather had left him? Pawned. The TV he used to fall asleep in front of? Sold to the neighbor 2 doors down. The tools he kept for someday when he might open his own small repair shop? Gone, one by one, exchanged for small stacks of bills he folded and put straight into a little white envelope in the kitchen drawer, labeled in his messy handwriting, "Baby." Inside that envelope went everything he thought a child needed. Diapers, bottles, a second-hand crib he found online and rebuilt with his own hands. On the wall above the crib, he taped the only ultrasound picture they had, paid in 2 installments. He could barely see anything but a blur and a little curved shape. But to him, it was already a face. Sometimes when Melissa was asleep, he stood in the doorway and stared at that crib like it was holy ground. He imagined a tiny hand grabbing his finger, a sleepy head on his chest. Bedtime stories after 12-hour shifts. The exhaustion never scared him. Being absent did. But somewhere around the 7th month, something in the air started to change. Melissa was quieter. Her phone lit up more often. She turned the screen away when he walked into the room, said it was just friends from work. She stopped laughing at the names he suggested, stopped making plans for when the baby comes, and started talking more about when I'm better and when everything is settled. Daniel noticed. Of course he noticed. But every time a question rose to his throat, he swallowed it with the same stubborn hope he used on everything else in life. "She's tired," he told himself, folding tiny onesies on the couch. "Pregnancy is hard. Don't make it about you. Just be there." The night everything broke started with a simple sound. His phone buzzing on the metal locker at work. He wiped his hands on his already stained shirt and grabbed it. The screen showed Melissa's sister. "Daniel, it's time." Her voice trembled on the other end. "Her water broke. We're at St. Mary's. They're taking her in. You need to come now." He glanced at the old clock above the break room door. His shift wasn't over. The supervisor wouldn't like it. His wallet, when he opened it, looked back at him almost empty. Just a crumpled bill, some coins, and a bus pass that was one ride away from useless. He didn't think twice. "Tell her I'm coming," he said, already tearing off his gloves. The supervisor yelled when he asked to leave. Daniel heard words like irresponsible and were already short-staffed, but all he could see was a hospital room without him in it. He took the warning, the threat of losing his job, and carried it out the door like extra weight on his shoulders. At the bus stop, he counted the coins in his hand 3 times. It would be enough for one ride, not for a taxi, not for a snack on the way, not for anything else. Just one ride. He thought of rent, of the electric bill already late, of the empty fridge. Then he thought of a tiny face he hadn't seen yet, and the decision was made. The driver looked at the worn-out bill, at Daniel's tired face, and at the hospital's name on the piece of paper he held. "Big night?" the driver asked. "My kid," Daniel managed, his voice cracking. "My baby's being born." The driver didn't answer, but for a moment his eyes softened. The bus lurched forward, and with every mile, Daniel's world shrank to one single point on the map: St. Mary's Hospital. When he finally stepped off, hours later, his legs ached and his head throbbed. The night air was cold and sharp. He had no money left, no backup plan, no idea what tomorrow would look like. But none of that mattered. He walked through the automatic doors of the hospital holding nothing but a folded piece of paper with Melissa's name, a pair of baby socks in his pocket, and a heart that believed, against everything, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He didn't know that just a few steps ahead, behind a set of double doors and a tired nurse's desk, the first words he'd hear wouldn't be, "Congratulations," or "It's a healthy baby," but the beginning of a sentence that would follow him all the way into a courtroom. The smell of antiseptic hit him first. St. Mary's was bright and polished, full of people in clean shoes and clean coats moving with a purpose that made Daniel feel even more out of place. His boots left faint marks on the floor, dust from the bus and the factory mixing with the shine of hospital tiles. He walked up to the front desk where a nurse with tired eyes and a stiff ponytail looked at him over her glasses. "Can I help you?" she asked, not unkind but not warm either. The word snagged in his throat. "My girlfriend, my partner, Melissa Carter," he said instead. "She came in. She's having a baby. Our baby. I'm the father." The nurse typed something into her computer, the keys clicking in quick bursts. "She's in labor and delivery," the nurse replied. "Only one support person at a time." Daniel's heart lurched. "Is she alone?" he asked. "Can I go up?" The nurse hesitated. Her eyes flicked to a clipboard. "It says her support person is already with her," the nurse said. The words landed like a small, quiet bomb. "Her what?" he asked, confused. I'm her support. I'm the father." "Sir, the band is already issued," she explained, nodding toward a locked drawer. "We only allow one person to go back. That's policy." "One person?" he repeated. Then someone made a mistake. Because she didn't tell me. There's no one else, it's me. Melissa knows I'm coming. Please, just call her. Tell her Daniel is here." There was a line forming behind him. People shifted, coughed, checked their phones. The nurse's jaw tightened. "I'll see what I can do," she said, already sounding over it. "Have a seat, Mr. Parker. he answered. "Daniel Parker." He sat in one of the plastic chairs, the kind that never let you get comfortable, and stared at the floor. The clock on the wall clicked loudly in his ears. Somewhere a baby cried high and sharp. The sound sliced straight through him. That could be mine, he thought. That could be my child's first sound. And I'm not there. Minutes turned into small eternities. Every time the doors to maternity swung open, he lifted his head, hoping to see a nurse waving him in, or Melissa's sister calling his name. Instead, he saw a man come out. The guy was about his age, maybe younger. Clean sneakers, nice jacket, hair styled in that careless way that took time and money. He held a white wristband in his hand, twisting it between his fingers as if he wasn't sure what to do with it now. Their eyes met for half a second. The man looked away first. He walked past Daniel without a word, but not without leaving a trail behind. A cheap cologne, a faint smell of cigarettes, and something else. Something Daniel couldn't name but felt anyway. Familiar? Wrong. Before Daniel could untangle the knot in his chest, Melissa's sister, Sophie, appeared at the door. "Daniel!" she whispered loudly, hurrying toward him. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen. "You're here." "Is the baby okay?" he asked, standing so fast the chair scraped the floor. "Is Melissa okay? They said there was someone already." "She's stable," Sophie said, choosing her words like they were landmines. "The baby is fine. A girl. She's beautiful." A girl. The word hit him like sunlight breaking through clouds. "A girl," he repeated, almost laughing. "I have a daughter." Sophie's face twitched at the word daughter. "Daniel, listen," she began, her hands fluttering between them like she wanted to touch his arm but didn't dare. She's not in a good headspace right now. She doesn't want—" "I need to see them," he interrupted gently but firmly. "Just for a second. Please, Sophie. I came all this way. I sold my tools. I left work. I don't even know how I'm going to make rent. I don't care about any of that, but I need to see my child. Just once. Please." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment he thought she might crumble and let him in. "Wait here," she said finally. "I'll ask." She disappeared back through the double doors. More waiting, more clock ticking. A gurney rolled by. Someone laughed at a joke in the hallway. A TV in the corner played a commercial with a smiling family and a baby reaching out to grab a cartoon balloon. Daniel looked away. He was rubbing the baby socks between his fingers like a talisman when the doors opened again. This time, it was Melissa. She was in a hospital gown, her hair damp and stuck to her forehead. Dark shadows carved themselves under her eyes. She moved slowly, one hand on her belly, the other holding on to the doorframe. "Melissa," he breathed, stepping forward. She didn't smile, didn't cry, didn't reach for him. Her eyes scanned him from top to bottom. The worn-out jacket, the tired face, the hope shining too bright for the fluorescent lights. Where's our baby?" he asked. "Sophie said she's okay. Can I see her? Is she really a girl?" He tried to laugh, to find that shared joy they used to have in small moments. The laugh never came. Melissa swallowed. Her fingers tightened on the metal rail of the door. "Daniel?" she said, and his name in her mouth sounded like something both familiar and far away. "You shouldn't have come." The words knocked the air out of his lungs. "What do you mean I shouldn't have come?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You're having our baby. I'm supposed to be here. I promised you. I promised her." He touched his chest, then gestured vaguely toward the corridor, as if the child was just around the corner. Melissa glanced over her shoulder, as if afraid someone might be listening. Her jaw tensed. "This isn't the time," she muttered. "You're making things harder." "Harder than what?" he asked, taking another step closer. He was close enough now to see the redness in her eyes, the way her lips trembled. "Talk to me, please. Just let me hold her. Just once." She took a breath, closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something in them had gone cold. "This isn't your child, Daniel," she said, each word slow and sharp. "You're not the father." For a second, the hospital noise vanished. No beeping machines, no footsteps, no distant cries, just a ringing in his ears and the echo of her sentence bouncing around his skull. "What?" he whispered. "You heard me," she replied, her gaze flicking away as if she couldn't stand to watch his face when the words dug in. "This baby. She's not yours. She never was." He laughed, but it came out broken. "Melissa, that's not funny," he said, shaking his head. "We've been together for years. We planned this. I held your hair when you were sick. I went to every appointment I could. I built her crib with my hands. There's someone else," she blurted. And there it was, the thing he had refused to name. I wasn't honest with you. I tried to fix it, but it was too late. He was here tonight. He has the band. He was in the room. Not you. The man with the nice jacket, the cologne, the wristband. A wave of nausea rolled through him. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. "I'm just... What, Melissa? A backup plan? Free labor? A wallet? Someone to hold your hair and pay half the rent until the real father showed up?" Her eyes flashed with guilt, then with anger. A defense mechanism more than conviction. "This isn't about you," she snapped softly. "You built this story in your head, Daniel. You decided you were the hero. But you're not. You were kind, helpful. But this child is not yours. You need to let it go and stop making a scene. Please, just go home." "Go home?" he repeated, his voice barely there. "Go home to what? To a crib I built for a baby who doesn't exist for me?" She pressed her lips together. For a moment, something in her expression wavered, like she might reach out and touch his arm, apologize, take it back. But then a nurse called her name from inside, and the moment shut like a door. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. The words flat, rushed, like she wanted them out. "But it's done. You don't belong here, Daniel." He stood rooted to the spot as she turned away. Through the thin gap in the door before it swung shut, he caught the smallest glimpse of a bassinet, a tiny pink hat, a little fist moving in the air. Then it was gone. He didn't remember walking back out through the automatic doors. Didn't remember the cold air or the way his hands shook so badly he dropped the baby socks on the sidewalk and had to bend down, knees buckling, to pick them up. He only remembered one thing, looping again and again in his mind like a cruel recording. "This isn't your child. You're not the father." By the time the sun started to smear a pale line across the horizon, Daniel wasn't just a man with empty pockets and blistered feet. He was a man whose entire idea of himself, of who he could be, had been ripped away in one night. But the story didn't end at that hospital door. Somewhere beneath the hurt, another thought began to grow, quiet and stubborn. If words could strip him of a child, maybe something else could give the truth back. Something that didn't care about guilt or excuses. Something that would later be read out loud in a silent courtroom, a result on a piece of paper, with his name and a percentage that could rebuild or completely shatter what was left of his heart. The walk back from the hospital felt longer than the ride there. Daniel didn't remember which streets he took. At some point, the city changed from glass and steel to worn brick and flickering streetlights. His hands stayed buried in his pockets, fingers curled around the baby socks like they were the last thread keeping him from coming apart. When he finally reached his building, the sun was already up. It painted the cracked hallway walls in weak gold that didn't reach the corners. Mrs. Hernandez from 3B was sweeping the corridor, her broom moving in slow, tired strokes. "Daniel?" She frowned, looking at his face. "You look like you haven't slept in 3 days. Is the baby here? Are they okay?" The word baby stung. "They're at the hospital," he said, his voice hoarse. "I just came back." She smiled, missing the tremor behind his words. "You're a father now," she said proudly. "Everything changes. Congratulations, mijo." He nodded because he didn't know what else to do. The congratulations clung to him like a shirt that didn't fit. He mumbled a thank you and climbed the stairs. Inside the apartment, the crib waited. It was the first thing he saw when he opened the door. The morning light slipped through the thin curtains and fell right on the small white frame he had sanded and painted by hand. Inside, a folded blanket, a stuffed bear he'd bought at a discount bin, an empty space where a tiny body should have been. He dropped his keys on the counter and sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at that emptiness until his eyes burned. "You don't belong here, Daniel." The words echoed. He grabbed his phone with shaking fingers and opened his messages. The last texts from Melissa were weeks old. Short replies, delayed answers, excuses about being tired, about appointments he couldn't join because of work. He scrolled further back to when the messages were long and full of emojis and exclamation marks, photos of the slowly growing belly, jokes about names, late-night confessions about fears and dreams. Then he opened her profile. He hadn't done that in a while. Not really. He'd trusted what they had and stayed busy building a future. But now, every picture felt like a piece of a puzzle he hadn't realized he was missing. There she was at a restaurant he couldn't afford, smiling at the camera, the angle just wide enough to show a man's hand on the table near hers. There she was at a concert, lights flashing behind her, a blurry male silhouette at her side. Captions with friends, co-workers, nothing serious. There was one photo he hadn't seen before, posted just a few hours ago. It was a close-up of a tiny hand wrapped around an adult finger. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, my little miracle." No tags, no mention of him. He zoomed in, looking at the adult hand, the skin tone, the shape, the faint scar near the thumb. It wasn't his. His thumb had a different scar from when he'd slipped with a screwdriver 3 years ago. He knew every mark on his own hands. These weren't them. His throat tightened. He dropped the phone on the bed and pressed his palms to his eyes. It doesn't prove anything, he told himself. Babies can hold anyone's hand. Maybe it's a nurse. Maybe it's her sister. Maybe... The excuses crumbled faster than he could build them. All day, he drifted around the apartment like a ghost. Every object reminded him of her. The folded onesies, the little pack of diapers, the half-assembled mobile he'd been planning to hang that weekend. By afternoon, the landlord knocked on the door to remind him about the rent. By evening, his supervisor called and left a voicemail that started with, "We need to talk about your absence," and ended with, "This can't happen again," in a tone that suggested it already had. But none of it pierced as deep as the silence from Melissa. Not one message, not one call. Around midnight, after staring at the ceiling for hours, Daniel sat up. This couldn't be the end. A sentence said in a hallway couldn't erase months of shared life, of doctor appointments, of late-night promises. It couldn't decide whether he was a father or just a man who had been used. Words could lie. Feelings could be rewritten. Stories could be twisted. But there had to be something that didn't care about any of that. He picked up his phone again, and for the first time, didn't open Melissa's profile or their old messages. He opened the browser and typed with clumsy fingers, "How to know if you're the father of a child legal DNA test court." Results flooded the screen. Articles, ads, law firm websites, videos of people crying on shows where envelopes were opened and truths exploded in front of cameras. One phrase kept appearing, "Paternity test admissible in court." He clicked one of the articles and read about something called family court, about how a father could file a petition to establish or disprove paternity, about how a judge could order a test if there was doubt. Doubt. That was the word his whole body was living in now. His thumb hovered over the call button on a small local law office's number for a long time. What if they laugh? What if they tell me I'm crazy? What if I really am just a man who built a story in his head? But beneath all the fear, there was something else. A stubborn, quiet voice that sounded a little like the one that had whispered into a pregnant belly months ago. "I don't care how hard it gets. I'll be here." He pressed call. The next morning, sitting in a cramped waiting room that smelled like old paper and coffee, Daniel listened as a woman in a blazer and scuffed heels explained the process to him. Her name was Ms. Clark, and she spoke in sentences that were short, clear, and stripped of anything extra. "If you believe you may be the father," she said, "you have the right to ask the court to establish paternity. That means they can order a DNA test. If the test says you are the father, you can ask for rights, custody, visitation, the whole thing. If it says you're not, then the record reflects that too." "And if the mother says I'm not?" he asked quietly. "If she says I'm nothing to this child?" Ms. Clark folded her hands on the desk. "Feelings don't decide paternity," she replied. "Evidence does, and DNA is strong evidence." He swallowed. "Will she have to be there?" he asked. "In court?" "Yes," Ms. Clark said. "Her and the child. The court will want all parties present. It can be emotional, messy. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" He thought of the hospital hallway, of the way Melissa's eyes had gone cold, of the empty crib waiting in his apartment, of the tiny hand on a stranger's finger. "I can't live the rest of my life not knowing," he said. "Either way, I need the truth." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, Mr. Parker," she said. "Then we'll file." As he signed the papers, his hand shook, but not from fear alone. For the first time since that night at the hospital, the path in front of him wasn't just fog and hurt. It led somewhere concrete, a building with a judge, a file with his name, and a test that would one day be read out loud in a room full of strangers, a room where his whole heart would be hanging on a percentage, and where the word father would finally be torn away from him completely or nailed to his name like something that could never again be argued. Family Courtroom 3B was smaller than Daniel expected. He had imagined something grand, like in the movies, high ceilings, echoing footsteps, a judge with a booming voice. Instead, the room was cramped, the paint a dull beige, the benches worn from years of people shifting nervously in their seats. The only thing that felt big inside that space was his heartbeat. "Sit here," Ms. Clark whispered, guiding him to the table on the left. "Remember, speak only when the judge addresses you or when I tell you. Stay calm. Let the process work." Calm. He wasn't sure he remembered how to do that. Melissa sat at the other table to the right. She wore a neat blouse and held a folder in her lap like a shield. Her hair was pulled back, makeup light but careful. Next to her sat a man in a pressed shirt and expensive-looking watch. Tyler, the name he'd overheard in hallway whispers and half-finished arguments. He'd never seen Tyler this close before. The man sat with one arm slung over the back of his chair, fingers tapping lazily, jaw clenched as if he was the one being inconvenienced. There was no trace of the night shift exhaustion Daniel wore like a second skin. Tyler looked like someone who slept well, ate well, and believed the world owed him the space he took up. Between their tables, in the arms of a social worker, was her. The baby. She was bigger now than she'd been in the hospital, cheeks rounder, hair like a soft dark halo. A tiny bow clung to her headband. Her eyes were wide, curious, taking in the room without understanding any of it. Daniel tried not to stare, but he failed. Every time she shifted, his attention snapped to her like a magnet. She could be mine, he thought. She could be mine, and I'm sitting here needing permission to even be near her. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood as the judge entered, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tired posture, as if she'd seen every version of heartbreak this room could offer and still had more to go. "You may be seated," she said. She glanced at the file in front of her. "This is the matter of Daniel Parker versus Melissa Carter regarding paternity of minor child, baby Carter. Are all parties present?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ms. Clark replied. Melissa's attorney, a sharp-jawed man in a dark suit, echoed the same. The judge's gaze drifted from the file to Daniel. "Mr. Parker," she said, "do you understand why you're here today?" He swallowed, his throat dry. "Yes, Your Honor," he answered. I filed to request a paternity test. to know if she's my daughter." The judge's eyes softened at the she. "And if the test establishes that she is your biological child," the judge continued carefully, "what do you want?" The question was bigger than the room. He thought of legal words he'd heard: custody, visitation, rights. But those were just shapes around what really lived in his chest. "I want to be her father," he said simply. "I want to be in her life, to take care of her, to be there, not just on paper, for real." "And if the test says she is not?" the judge asked. He exhaled slowly, the weight of that possibility pressing down on his rib cage. "Then I'll live with the truth," he said softly. "But I can't live with not knowing." The judge nodded once, like she'd been waiting to hear exactly that. She turned to Melissa. "Ms. Carter," she said, "you've stated in your filings and through counsel that you do not believe Mr. Parker is the father. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Melissa replied, her voice steadier than his. "He is not the father. The attorney beside her stood. Your Honor, my client maintains that the child was conceived during a period when the relationship with Mr. Parker was already effectively over," he said. "She asserts that another man, present today as Tyler Briggs, is the likely biological father. Mr. Briggs has been involved and supportive since birth." Daniel's jaw tightened. Supportive. He thought of holding Melissa's hair over the sink when morning sickness hit, of working extra shifts for baby formula, of selling his tools to buy a crib. "Mr. Parker has formed a narrative in his head," the attorney went on, "and while we understand his emotional investment, that does not entitle him to force himself into this child's life against the mother's wishes." The word narrative stung, like his sacrifices were just a story he'd invented. Ms. Clark stood smoothly. "With respect, Your Honor," she said, "this is not about a narrative. This is about a man who lived with the mother during the time the child was conceived, who attended appointments, who prepared a home, who believed, because of the mother's actions, that he was going to be a father. When she abruptly cut him out at the birth and claimed the child is someone else's, he did not make threats. He did not show up at her job. He came here, through the correct legal channels, to request a test. That is not obsession. That is a responsible attempt to find the truth." "Oh." The judge listened without interrupting, her eyes traveling from one table to the other. "Ms. Carter," she said, turning back to Melissa, "did you inform Mr. Parker during your pregnancy that there was a possibility he might not be the father?" Melissa's fingers tightened around the folder on her lap. "No," she admitted. "I didn't." "Did you allow him to provide financial and emotional support during that time?" "Yes," she said after a pause. "Did you tell him not to come to the hospital when you went into labor?" the judge asked. Melissa glanced at Tyler, then at her attorney. "I didn't tell him not to come," she said slowly. "I just didn't call him. I had already decided Tyler was the father." So, from his perspective," the judge continued, her tone calm but firm, "you disappeared into the hospital, gave birth to a child he believed was his, and when he arrived after great effort, he was told he was not the father, with no explanation, no proof, and no prior warning. Do you understand how that might be emotionally devastating?" Melissa's lips pressed into a hard line. "I didn't want drama," she muttered. "I didn't want him in the room. I knew what I wanted." The judge sighed, the sound heavy. "This court is not here to replay every unkind word spoken in hospital hallways," she said. "We are here to determine the best interests of a child, guided by the truth of biology and the reality of relationships." She looked at Daniel again. "Mr. Parker," she asked, "if the test excludes you, do you intend to cause problems for this family?" He shook his head quickly. "No, Your Honor," he said. "If I'm not her father, I'll step back. I just need to know. I need to hear it from something that doesn't change its mind." There was a murmur from the back benches. A couple of people who weren't even connected to the case exchanged glances, their eyes softening as they looked at him. The judge tapped her pen against the file, thinking. "The court will order a DNA test," she said finally. "All parties will submit to testing at the approved facility. We will reconvene when the results are available. Until then, there will be no changes in physical custody. Visitation for Mr. Parker is not granted at this time, pending the outcome." Daniel's stomach dropped at that last part. He had half hoped the judge might say, "You may see her, just once, supervised. 1 hour, 10 minutes, anything." Instead, he watched the social worker carry the baby out of the room, her tiny head resting against a stranger's shoulder, unaware that a man at a table was silently aching at the sight of her. Melissa didn't look at him as they left. Tyler glanced back once, an unreadable expression in his eyes, pity, annoyance, maybe a small spark of victory. Ms. Clark touched Daniel's arm. "This is still progress," she said gently. "You did well. The order is in place. Now we wait for the test." "How long?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Usually a couple of weeks," she replied. "I'll call you as soon as I hear anything, and when we come back here, the judge won't be dealing with feelings and guesses. She'll have numbers in front of her." He nodded slowly. Numbers, percentages. A printed line that would either slice the last thread of hope he held, or tie him to that little girl in a way no one could ever legally deny again. As he walked out of the courtroom, the hallway felt longer than any road he had ever traveled. He had spent his last cent to reach a hospital. Now, it felt like he was spending the last pieces of his heart to reach a truth that might break it completely. And somewhere in a lab he would never see, a swab carrying his DNA, and another from the baby would be sealed, labeled, and compared. Preparing an answer that would soon be spoken out loud, under oath, in the same room where he had just watched her leave without even knowing his name. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Daniel was eating a bowl of instant noodles at the small table in his kitchen, the unpaid bills pushed into a messy pile at the corner, when the sharp rap on the door made his fork pause mid-air. "Mr. Parker?" a voice called from the hall. He opened the door to find a courier holding a clipboard and a large flat envelope with the court's return address printed in black at the top. "I need your signature," the courier said. Daniel's hand trembled as he took the pen. The moment the envelope touched his palm, something inside him went silent. Like his body understood before his mind did that this thin piece of paper carried more weight than anything he had ever held. "Have a good day," the courier said, already walking away. Good day, he thought numbly. We'll see. For a long time he just stood there, the door half open, the envelope resting against his chest. He could open it now. He could tear it along the edge, unfold the pages and find the answer alone, with only the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the cheap wall clock to witness his reaction. He pictured both possibilities in quick flashes. If it said excluded, he would fold the letter back up, place it in a drawer, and spend the rest of his life telling himself he'd done everything he could. The pain would still come, but at least it would be grounded in something solid. If it said 99, 99%, he would feel vindicated and scared at the same time. Being right wouldn't magically give him a fatherhood that was simple or easy. It would mean more court dates, more arguments, more fights for weekends and holidays and decisions. Either way, the envelope would change him. His phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Ms. Clark. "Do not open the results. Bring them sealed to court. The judge will read them on record. I'll explain when you get here." He exhaled shakily, relief and disappointment twisting together. He placed the envelope carefully in his backpack. Between a folded hoodie and the baby socks he still couldn't bring himself to throw away. "Okay," he whispered to the empty room. "Okay, we'll do it there." The courtroom felt different the second time. The same beige walls, the same worn benches, the same judge's name on the small brass plate. Yet the air felt tighter, as if everyone inside was waiting for something to explode. Wordless eyes followed Daniel as he took his seat at the left table again. Some belonged to strangers, just passing time while waiting for their own cases. Others were attached to faces he now recognized. Melissa sat across from him, a storm tucked neatly behind careful makeup. Tyler looked annoyed to even be there, checking his watch, scrolling his phone until his attorney nudged him to stop. The baby wasn't in the room this time. She was in a supervised waiting area down the hall, a staff member assigned to keep her safe and occupied while adults argued over the shape of her life. "Breathe," Miss Clark murmured from beside him. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Don't borrow trouble from the future. Right now, we're only dealing with one thing, the truth of the test." "Just the truth," he repeated, more to himself than to her. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood as the judge walked in. Her eyes looked a little more tired than last time, but there was something almost gentle in the way she glanced between the tables. "You may be seated," she said. Once they were all settled, she folded her hands on the bench. "We are reconvened in the matter of Daniel Parker versus Melissa Carter regarding paternity of minor child baby Carter," she said. "The court has ordered and received the results of a DNA test. My understanding is that the tested parties were Mr. Parker and the minor child. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ms. Clark confirmed. "Yes, Your Honor," Melissa's attorney echoed. The judge lifted a large envelope from the file. The twin of the one in Daniel's backpack now slid open along the top. She slid a set of papers from inside and adjusted her glasses. "Before I read these results," she said, "I want everyone in this room to understand something. DNA does not erase what was said, or done, or felt. It does not fix every hurt or answer every question. But in this court, it does carry significant weight in determining legal rights and responsibilities." Daniel swallowed. His hands clenched together on the table, knuckles pale. The judge began to read, her voice steady, professional. "The test was conducted at an accredited facility," she said. "Swabs were taken from Mr. Parker and from the minor child. The lab performed standard analysis on multiple genetic markers to determine the probability of paternity. The result—" She paused to turn a page. In that brief silence, the entire room seemed to lean forward. Breath held. "Indicates that Mr. Daniel Parker cannot be excluded as the biological father of the minor child," the judge continued. "The probability of paternity is calculated at greater than 99.99%. The words landed like a thunderclap. For half a second, Daniel didn't move. He heard the numbers. He understood the sentence, but his brain refused to stitch them into meaning. Cannot be excluded. 99%. Then the reality hit. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't just a man who had built a story in his head. He wasn't a stranger who'd wandered into someone else's family by mistake. He was her father. Air rushed back into his lungs in a shaky, half-sobbed breath. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, but tears still spilled over, hot and embarrassing, tracking down his cheeks in front of everyone. He didn't care. Across the room, Melissa's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like she'd forgotten how to form words. Tyler swore under his breath, his chair scraping as he shifted, anger and something like panic flashing across his features. "This has to be wrong," Melissa blurted. There was another test, a home test. It said—" "Miss Carter," the judge cut in calmly. "Home tests purchased online are not admissible in this court. This test was conducted by a certified laboratory, chain of custody procedures observed, and its findings are clear. Mr. Parker is the biological father." Melissa's shoulders sagged. For the first time since all this began, she looked small, not cold, not powerful, just small, and very, very human in her mistakes. The judge turned her attention back to Daniel. "Mr. Parker," she said, "you came into this court polite, respectful, and honest about your doubts and your hopes. You followed the law. You did not take matters into your own hands. You trusted this process, even though it was painful." The results confirm that you are not only emotionally invested in this child, but biologically connected to her as well." He opened his mouth, closed it, then managed a rough, "Thank you, Your Honor," even though it felt like too small a phrase for what he was feeling. The judge wasn't finished. "Now comes the harder part," she said. "We must turn from biology to responsibility. From, is he the father, to, what does it mean for him to be the father? We will schedule a separate hearing to address custody, visitation, and support. In the meantime," she paused, studying him. "In the meantime, this court is granting Mr. Parker temporary, supervised visitation with the minor child," she continued. "Twice a week at the family center, for 2 hours each time. This will allow the child and Mr. Parker to begin forming a bond in a safe environment." Daniel's chest tightened again, this time in a different way. It wasn't a full victory. It wasn't late-night feedings and first steps and bedtime stories in the small apartment he'd prepared. But it was something real. It was the right to sit across from his daughter, to watch her wrap her hand around his finger, not in a borrowed daydream, but in actual time. "Mr. Parker," the judge added, her voice softening, "being a father is not something this court gives you. It's something you choose to be every day, with every decision, especially now. These numbers open a door. What you do with that door is up to you." He nodded, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I won't walk away," he said softly.
"Not now. Not ever." As the hearing ended and people began to shuffle out of the room, Daniel stayed seated for a moment, letting the noise wash over him. He thought of that long bus ride with the baby socks in his hands, of the hospital hallway, of the sentence that had shattered him. "You're not the father. This child was never yours." Now, another sentence lived beside it. "Mr. Parker cannot be excluded as the biological father. Probability of paternity, 99.999%.
One had come from hurt and fear. The other came from something that didn't care about pride or panic, just truth written in code beneath the skin. When he finally stepped out into the hallway, a staff member was waiting, holding a baby with dark hair and curious eyes. "Mr. Parker?" she asked. "Are you ready for your first visit?" He looked at his daughter. His heart, bruised and stitched and scarred, answered before he did. "Yes," he whispered, a trembling smile breaking through. "I've been ready for a long time."